Our cover story tonight is a study in contrast between two of the world's biggest economies. Yes, we're talking about India and China. Both of these countries are worth trillions. Almost 3 billion people live in India and China. That's roughly 40% of the world's population. In a changing world order, the growth path of these two countries matters. India and China are both economic powerhouses, both with immense potential. So when we hail this partnership, we must also dwell on the asymmetry in this equation, the wide gap between these two countries. And tonight we compare India and China and ask if India can replicate the China growth story. As always, we believe in relying on data to tell a story, cold, hard facts to see where we stand. According to the numbers put out by the International Monetary Fund, India is projected to grow at a faster pace than China. But look at what China has already accomplished, and this will not sound like a compliment. While India is in the process of building its first high-speed rail line, China has already laid out 20,000 kilometers of high-speed rail lines in the last 10 years. China has more internet users than India. More than 500 million people will be using the internet in India by the month of June. China crossed the 700 million mark last year. Only 3.3% of the Chinese population still lives below the poverty line. In India, that figure touches 22%. Almost 97% of the Chinese population is literate. For India, the literacy level just about touches 70%. Life expectancy in China is nearly 76 years. In India, it's 69. The point we're making is that despite India's faster growth rate, Chinese citizens seem to have a better quality of life. The question then is, how did they do it? China's growth story is mainly driven by investment in infrastructure, real estate and factories. Rise in consumer spending and the growth of the services sector has helped their economy. After the reforms of the 1970s, China experienced rapid economic and social development. It has already achieved the Millennium Development Goals. More than 800 million people in that country have been lifted from poverty after the Deng Xiaoping era reforms. The reforms put more money in the hands of the people, and these reforms enabled the Chinese government to invest in areas like education and job creation. China has been the largest contributor to world growth since the global financial crisis of 2008. Between the year 2007 and 2015, China accounted for 30% of all global infrastructure investment. Sustained dominance in trade and export has earned Beijing diplomatic heft. It's a force to be reckoned with now. China has a say in the global economy debate. Numbers show a steady growth in exports, construction and consumer spending in the last 7 years. China last year said that its economy had expanded 6.9%. This was thanks to strong numbers in exports, retail sales, property markets. Such growth helps China combat other challenges like rising debt, growing pollution. Basically, they now have the money to invest in technologies that can fight climate change. So what sets China apart? How do they do it? The business-like approach to governance helps. Targets are set for local officials by the central government, and the Chinese president runs the system like the CEO of a giant enterprise. In India, we tend to blame the slow pace of progress on the large population. China's is larger. It has turned its population into its biggest strength, its asset. Of course, it wasn't achieved without some controversial policies like the one-child rule. Multiple studies into China's rise as an economic powerhouse say that this growth has been largely labor-intensive, driven by high levels of fixed capital investment. This is why China has become the destination for foreign companies to mass-produce their products. China's ruling Communist Party defines the country's economic model as, quote-unquote, socialism with Chinese characteristics. But the country still remains loyal to communism. The political class keeps a firm grip on every aspect of a citizen's life. Despite communism's failure around the world, China's meteoric rise on the world stage still continues. The latest from West Asia now, Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu took on favourite enemy Iran, claiming new revelations about its nuclear weapons program. WION's West Asia Bureau Chief Daniele Pagani, however, notes that much of Netanyahu's revelations are old hat, and that the International Atomic Energy Agency, or the IAEA, had already documented extensive details of Iran's nuclear program. So what is the Israeli Prime Minister talking about?
55,000 pages.
The largely pro-Western international media is going to town with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's latest broadside against the Iran nuclear deal.
First, Iran lied about never having a nuclear weapons program. 100,000 secret files prove that they lied. Second, even after the deal, Iran continued to preserve and expand its nuclear weapons know-how for future use. Why would a terrorist regime hide and meticulously catalog its secret nuclear files if not to use them at a later date? Third, Iran lied again in 2015 when it didn't come clean to the IAEA as required by the nuclear deal. And finally, the Iran deal, the nuclear deal, is based on lies. It's based on Iranian lies and Iranian deception. 100,000 files right here prove that they lied.
US President Donald Trump was quick to respond, claiming the intelligence proved his assertion that Iran was cheating and the deal was the worst ever. Ditto his newly appointed Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. But UK, France and Germany, the three European signatories to the Iran deal, are still backing it with enough reason. The existence of Project Ahmad, Iran's designation for the nuclear program, was known to the International Atomic Energy Agency in 2015 when it filed its final assessment on Iran's nuclear capabilities. The IAEA report read, and I quote, "The information indicated that activities commenced in the late 1980s and became focused in the early 2000s within projects in the Ahmad Plan. The agency assesses that before the end of 2003, an organizational structure was in place in Iran suitable for the coordination of a range of activities relevant to the development of a nuclear explosive device. Although some activities took place after 2003, they were not a part of the coordinated effort." Netanyahu said there was now proof that Iran planned to conduct tests and feasibility studies to build nuclear weapons, but the IAEA knew about this too. Their 2015 report read, and I quote, "By November 2011, the agency had received information from member states indicating that prior to 2004 and between 2005 and 2009, Iran had undertaken computer modeling studies of various component agreements which were only specific to nuclear explosive configurations based on implosion technology." Netanyahu's other so-called revelation that Israeli intelligence came to know that Iran had studied how to integrate a nuclear warhead on their Shabab 3 medium-range ballistic missile was known to the IAEA and the US. The body's final report read, and I quote, "Extensive information provided to the agency within the alleged studies documentation prior to November 2011 indicated detailed project work conducted in Iran in 2002-2003 to examine how to integrate a new spherical payload into the existing payload chamber of the re-entry vehicle for the Shabab 3 missile." Many documents still need to be analyzed and further details could emerge. For now, the most relevant discovery is that at a certain point, Iran moved its entire nuclear-related documentation to a secret location, a decision Tehran will need to explain. In Amman, with Daniel Ipagani, Bureau Report, WION.
The Israeli Prime Minister is no stranger to using visual props for his big-ticket presentations. Monday's PowerPoint on why he thinks Iran has run afoul of the 2015 nuclear deal was no exception. But beyond the United States, the Silicon Valley-style big reveal did not get the response Bibi was probably looking for. The United Nations atomic watchdog, for instance, has declined to directly address Mr. Netanyahu's accusations, saying, and I'm quoting, "In line with standard IAEA practice, the IAEA evaluates all safeguards, relevant information available to it. However, it is not the practice of the IAEA to publicly discuss issues related to any such information." France took things a step further. In light of Mr. Netanyahu's allegations, its foreign ministry spokesperson said, and I'm quoting again, "This information should be studied and evaluated in detail. The new information presented by Israel could also confirm the need for longer-term assurances on the Iranian program, as the president has proposed." The United Kingdom, meanwhile, has expressed a sentiment almost identical to France. The newly appointed US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, meanwhile, gave an expected thumbs up to Israel's allegations, but even he declined to say whether the documents were evidence of Iran violating the nuclear deal. So despite the hype, Some experts and diplomats felt Netanyahu's presentation lacked the smoking gun appeal of a blockbuster revelation. There was consensus, however, that it could strengthen Trump's demand to scrap the deal.
That the publication by Prime Minister Netanyahu and its timing was aimed not to pressure President Trump, but to support a decision that was already made by the president. I know that National Security Advisor Bolton has said that the president has not yet made his decision, but my sources in Israeli administration and intelligence claim that they understood from their American counterpart.
Mr. Netanyahu sure knows how to make a splash at a press conference, but his tricks may be nothing compared to what Indian lawmakers resort to hit the headlines. The template is very simple. All you have to do is make politically incorrect statements. The ruling Bharatiya Janata Party in India and its leaders seem to be mastering that art. Despite the Prime Minister's warning and caveats, his party men are far from course correcting. Our next report looks at the BJP's loose cannons.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi is on a campaign blitz to lead his party to victory in another Indian state. But while he tries to expose the incompetence of his political rivals, many of his partymen are busy exposing themselves. The Tripura Chief Minister tops the list of the party's loose cannons. Biplab Kumar Deb has in fact hit a hat-trick with his controversial comments. The Chief Minister made a racist slur against a former Miss World Diana Hayden when he said she does not represent Indian women.
लगातार मिस वर्ल्ड मिस यूनिवर्स सब भारतवर्ष से लगातार 5 बार कोई भी जा मिल जाता डायना हैडन को मिल जाता उधर को हंसता क्या प्रधान सचिव जी डायना हैडन को मिलना चाहिए था अब वितर्क हो जाएगा क्या बोलता विप्लव.
He also mocked unemployed youth when he suggested that they should open a pawn shop rather than run after government jobs. The Tripura Chief Minister even offered some comic relief with one such comment.
देश वो देश है जिसमें महाभारत में संजय ने बैठ के धृतराष्ट्र को युद्ध में क्या हो रहा था बोल रहा था. तो इसका मतलब क्या है? टेक्नोलॉजी था, इंटरनेट था, सैटेलाइट थी. संजय के आंख से कैसे दिख सकता वो? उसका मतलब टेक्नोलॉजी थी.
In January, the junior Minister for Human Resource Development, Satyapal Singh, claimed that Darwin's theory of evolution was scientifically wrong and needed to be removed from the country's school curriculum. His logic was that no books he had read or tales told by his grandparents ever made mention of this theory. He went on to say that none of our ancestors said anything about an ape turning into a man. Not wanting to be left behind, Gujarat Chief Minister Vijay Rupani compared the Hindu mythological sage Narad Muni, who was famous for knowing everything, to Google.
Google information no સ્ત્રોત છે તો નારાજને ગૂગલ સાથે પણ સરખાવી શકાય કારણ કે એ દુનિયાના જે પળમાં કાંઈ ચાલતું હતું એ બધું એની પાસે રહેતું હતું. જે હમણાં ઉદાહરણ આપ્યું કે બલરામને મહાભારતના સમાચાર આપ્યા, અલગ અલગ વખતે અલગ અલગ લોકોને સમાચારો એ પહોંચાડવાનું કામ નારાજજી કરતા હતા.
BJP's list of motor mouths is long. Some are outrightly ridiculous. For example, when the BJP MLA Surendra Singh shielded the accused in a rape case by claiming that in the case of a mother of 3, it cannot be called rape. The elected representative was shielding his own party member who was accused of rape when he made the comment. Surendra Singh is a repeat offender. He compared the Chief Minister of West Bengal, Mamata Banerjee, to the mythical demoness Surpanakha in the wake of widespread violence in her state. While the country was demanding answers on the brutal rape of a minor in Jammu and Kashmir's Katwa district, this union minister left his party red-faced by saying that such incidents cannot be stopped at times. Santosh Gangwar shamelessly added that in a big country such as India, there should be no brouhaha if 1 or 2 rape incidents took place. Another shocker came in from the Chief Minister of India's biggest state, Uttar Pradesh, Yogi Adityanath. While inspecting the site of an accident in which 13 children were killed, the Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister asked the aggrieved parents to stop what he called their drama and not crowd the collision site. The Indian Prime Minister just recently pulled up his motor-mouth leaders for speaking out of turn and making preposterous comments. But his words seem to have had no effect on many of his partymen who continue to embarrass themselves and the ruling party. Bureau Report, WION.
Today is International Labour Day, a day that was originally chosen by socialist, labour and communist organisations. But today, this day is celebrated worldwide. May Day has its roots in the Anglo-Saxon custom which bids goodbye to winter and marks the beginning of summer. Villages and towns across the United Kingdom mark the beginning of springtime fertility on this day. The maypole dancing assumes significance as it symbolises a way of bidding farewell to winter. A lot of people also get a day off on the first Monday in May, not us. But what started as a day of celebration is increasingly becoming a day to mark protests. On the 1st of May every year, workers across the globe unite and rally in support of trade unionization, better working conditions, higher pay, better standards of living. In Hong Kong, an estimated 2,500 protesters took to the streets today to press for their demands for better rights and benefits. South Korean workers also took to the streets, demanding better working conditions. Tens of thousands of these people gathered in the Seoul Square and chanted slogans while holding banners. In Taiwan, people flooded the streets in Taipei, calling for a referendum to repeal labour reform. Protesters gathered in front of a presidential palace before embarking on their march there. Immigrants in the United States planned big rallies as they accused the Trump administration of becoming everything they had initially feared. Marches and demonstrations have been planned from Florida to New York and to California. Immigrant rights groups also joined in to push for rolling back of harsh legislation against immigrants, demanding reform and legal status for these people. And the list does not end there. Countries like the Philippines, France, Spain, Cuba and Britain saw widespread marches pushing for demands to make due changes in labour legislation. So how did it all begin? The seeds of dissent were sown in the 19th century with the advent of the Industrial Revolution. Workers came out in large numbers to protest long working hours, low wages and zero regard for labour laws. Here's the story of May Day.
Philippines, Indonesia, South Korea, Taiwan, Iraq. Workers around the world took to the streets to commemorate the International Labour Day, to raise their voice against the existing policies, to speak up against the unfair treatment of the labour class, and to celebrate the value of their blood, sweat and tears. Over 80 countries in the world observe May 1st as a national holiday. Let's go back in time to understand why the 1st of May became a landmark day for workers across the globe. It has its origins in America. When the process of industrialization was at its peak in the 19th century, many workers started to feel the pinch. Their working hours stretched for 15 hours a day, improper wages, no job security, led to massive resentment. They channelized their anger and turned their exploitation into a revolution. The trigger, however, was a riot in Chicago in the Haymarket Square in 1886. On May 1st, workers carried out a strike demanding an 8-hour workday. On 4th of May, the police acted to disperse the crowd where a bomb went off at the market. The police fired indiscriminately at the workers, leading to several deaths and injuries. In India, the Labour Kisan Party commemorated the first Labour Day in 1923 in Chennai. So has anything changed since 1886? Let's listen from the horse's mouth.
Labour is a paid wages, not instead of being a slave. Hence, today we are we are urging the government to be some review on some system like the standard working hour, also the living wages, also the MPF sack-off. This all will be benefit for the workers.
I've been dedicating myself to work for the government for 13 years as a contractor, and I feel that I'm being discriminated against. And the gap is too high compared to the civil servants. In fact, sometimes we work a lot more.
On this day, I wish for the working classes to be treated fairly because we are oppressed and marginalized. I hope the Iraqi government follows the Western countries' model by appreciating the working class. As we are approaching national elections, everyone must participate to change the old faces that gave nothing to the working class and Iraq.
Workers are the backbone of an economy. Can the governments of the day turn a blind eye to the deep-rooted resentment that's building up? Bureau Report, WION.